Donald Trump bombed Iran over the weekend in violation of the UN Charter and the US Constitution, blowing up crucial nuclear negotiations with Tehran in the process. And yet the response from many Democrats, most Democrats, certainly Democratic leadership in Congress, was simply to complain about process issues. Why didn't he brief us first? Why didn't he let the committees know? Why wasn't there a vote in Congress? Outright opposition to a new war in the Middle East on principle has been hard to find. And Democrats who are willing to question our blind support for Israel are few and far between. One Democrat on the House Foreign Affairs and Intel committees who has been critical of Donald Trump's foreign policy and bombing campaigns, and who even under Joe Biden was calling for restrictions on US military aid to the Netanyahu government, is Representative Joaquin Castro of Texas. And he joins me now. Congressman, thanks for coming on Mehdi Unfiltered.
Yeah.
So a lot to talk about. Let's start with Iran. What was your reaction on Saturday evening when you first heard the US had bombed Iran? Were you surprised? Did you see it coming?
I guess I wasn't surprised because Donald Trump has ignored due process, the rule of law, has ignored Congress. But I was very alarmed. And I'll tell you, the times, like in Syria around 2013, the times where there has been the prospect of another war in the Middle East are the times where I have gotten the most calls and emails and texts from people back home saying, we don't want to be part of another long, deadly, and expensive war in the Middle East. So I knew that the public reaction was going to be very strong. And, you know, the thing that worked the most was when we actually had the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear agreement, to keep their nuclear program in check. And Israel essentially started bombing there, attacking Iran, knowing that they didn't have the bombers or the bombs to actually finish the job. In other words, they couldn't completely dismantle or neutralize the Iranian nuclear program. So they needed the United States. They needed Donald Trump to get involved. And for a while, I thought he was going to stay out, that he was actually going to pursue getting back into an agreement, but that didn't happen.
It's interesting that you mentioned the Israelis starting this war, being unable to finish it. You then mentioned that people called you and said, you know, back in the day, saying nobody wants a long Middle East war. Trump would say, well, it's not a long Middle East war. He's called it the 12-day war. He's given it a name. He's a TV guy. He knows how to name brand things. He would say, look, we ended it. Is it over? I mean, most nuclear experts are saying, actually, the Iranians are probably more likely to go for a nuclear weapon now because they have the uranium, they didn't destroy all the sites, and they have an incentive to get a nuclear weapon. Why wouldn't they want to get nukes now when they're getting attacked?
No, I think that's right. I think they have an incredible incentive to become like North Korea, that the world feels that it can't really mess with because they've got nuclear weapons. I think Iran, I think the president and Benjamin Netanyahu have given Iran that incentive now. And, well, first, I'm glad that none of our service members were hurt, that everybody was safe. I represent San Antonio, which is known as Military City, USA. And so I'm glad that they were safe. I'm glad that the fighting, that there is essentially a ceasefire right now. Now, the question is, do I think that's going to hold based on everything that I've seen, the intelligence and everything? I hope that it does, but honestly, I don't think it will. I think that what's possible is that Iran starts to rebuild its nuclear program. Again, Israel...
This time in secret?
Yeah, I mean, in 6 months or 3 months or a year, Israel goes back and strikes again, and you basically just repeat what happened all over again.
Which is what they do in Gaza, which we'll come to, the mowing the lawn. They're going back in and attacking every few years. You mentioned looking at the intelligence. You are on the Intel committee. The Defense Intelligence Agency put out this preliminary and says, well, they didn't put it out. It was obtained by media organizations, the New York Times, CNN and others, showing that Fordo wasn't fully destroyed, showing that, you know, Donald Trump's claim to have obliterated these sites was not true. The administration, of course, has reacted by shouting, screaming, having a tantrum, lying, attacking the intelligence people, attacking the media. Pete Hegseth attacked his former Fox colleague Jennifer Griffin this morning just for asking him, do you know where all the uranium is? You're on the Intel committee. What do you make of, A, these attacks on the Intel committee, and B, the actual intelligence that you are seeing about whether Iran's nuclear program was ended by these strikes?
Sure. Well, you know, being on the Intel committee, obviously I can't discuss the contents of classified briefings, but I can say that based on everything I've seen, my impression is that the president was not honest about his assessment that this is no longer a threat. And that's why I say I think we're going to be at it again under Donald Trump. And it becomes more and more dangerous because I think, Mehdi, a few things could happen here. Either Iran continues to enrich uranium without any international oversight, and they actually get to the point where they've enriched the uranium, they have perfected the device and the missile to deliver it. Because remember, even though they were enriching uranium, that's just one part.
Yes.
That's one piece of it. There's still a long way to go for a country to know that it's got a fully functional, deliverable nuclear weapon that can hit another country. And they were still a long way off from that.
Liking this video? Then don't just watch, hit like, share and subscribe. And tap the bell so you never miss a video or live show. But if you want early access to exclusive content, then you have to head to zeteo.com and subscribe now. You'll be supporting fearless, independent journalism.
That's why a lot of folks, including myself, were saying there was no imminent threat.
Yep.
There was no threat within the next several days or even the next few months.
Which makes the attack illegal. Without an imminent threat, you have no legal justification to do this.
You know, yeah, and so there was not a reason to choose this action over diplomacy. Diplomacy had been proven to work with the JCPOA. This has not shown that it's going to work. And so having seen all of it, I don't think that number one, we can count on them not trying that. And then secondly, I think we're going to could get into this loop again. Then finally, let's just say that Israel and the United States are successful. And I think that Benjamin Netanyahu not only wants to contain that nuclear program, but also wants regime change. Yeah. He wants a different Iranian government. And look, Israel feels threatened by Iran and so forth. But let's just imagine that happened. There is a danger there as well. Because Iran is a country, as Tucker Carlson reminded us, of over 90 million people. And Iraq was a country of maybe 40 or 45 million. What happened after Iraq, when it collapsed, and even to an extent with Afghanistan, is that you saw terrorism start to franchise and different terrorist groups pop up in the Middle East and parts of North Africa. Well, imagine if Iran collapses and you've got all these groups fighting each other. There is a big danger that you're going to see a similar or larger thing happen, which could pose threats to the United States down the road.
So you mentioned the intel not showing an imminent threat, and Donald Trump is not telling us the truth. Shock horror. Tulsi Gabbard, who was once in your party, you served alongside her.
Yeah, we came into Congress the same year. I think we sat next to each other on the Foreign Affairs Committee.
And she always kind of branded herself as the anti-war person, even when she was a Democrat. Now she's a Republican in a Republican administration. She's the director of intelligence, has a pretty big role to stop regime change wars.
Yeah, I mean, that's the main role, overseeing all the intel agencies.
She comes out and basically throws herself under the bus, because in March, she sat in front of Congress and said, they're not building a nuke. They're not anywhere near a nuke. They don't have a nuke.
I think that's because he was going to try to stick to that diplomatic route.
Yes.
And she was probably trying to set that up for him, saying, oh, we don't need to go in there and bomb because they're not building a nuke.
But once he bombed, and he was asked, why'd you do it when Tulsi, he threw her under the bus. Sure. She came out and said, no, people are misrepresenting my testimony. I didn't say what we all heard you say. Does she have any credibility left as Director of National Intelligence? She's disowning her own intelligence assessment from March.
You know, I mean, sadly, very little credibility. And I actually don't say that with glee. I mean, Tulsi and I always got along. We had a hearing when she did an open hearing with Ratcliffe and a few others. And I pointed out to her back then, like, hey, but basically, we've always gotten along. I've never had a beef with you. But what's happening now is that they're bending the intelligence to suit whatever the president wants.
Yes.
And that's dangerous for the United States. And in the long run, it's going to create for more dangerous scenarios that make us all less safe.
The other day, Al Green, your colleague from Texas, House member, introduced a measure that would have forced a vote on an impeachment measure against Donald Trump for this unconstitutional strike on Iran. 128 House Democrats joined with Republicans in order to kill those that impeachment prospect. You were not one of those who voted to strike it down. How disappointed were you with your party, with so many of your colleagues, that they're just not interested in going all the way in terms of holding Trump to account, even now, even 6 months into a second term, where he continues to do lawless things at home and abroad?
Well, I mean, look, to their defense, it was something that came up that morning, I think. So some people were caught off guard, what is this, right? Usually an impeachment resolution takes a while to craft, and honestly, it should have included more things than only the issue of Iran. Yeah. For example, ignoring court orders.
Yes.
Very obviously ignoring court orders. And it didn't include those things, right? But I think for us to not at least, that was a motion to table. So they were saying basically, should we have this debate or not? Should we consider this or not? For us to say, no, we shouldn't consider it at all, when the president ignored the Constitution, ignored the War Powers Act, acted unilaterally, and this could have turned into another very long, very expensive, very deadly war in the Middle East. You know, for us not to go forward, I thought to at least have that debate would have been irresponsible.
As someone who, I think it's fair to say, styles himself as a progressive on foreign policy, is that fair?
Sure.
As someone in that position, how worried are you about your party's reputation when it comes to foreign policy, when it comes to issues of war and peace? Even if you take Iran, yes, Barack Obama gave us the diplomatic deal, one of the best things he did, without a shadow of a doubt, but Joe Biden didn't get us back into that deal over 4 years, helped pave the way for this. Just in recent weeks, we had Chuck Schumer attacking him from the right on Iran, saying Taco Trump needs to be tougher on Iran. John Fetterman, of course, has been gung-ho for American military action against Iran. Even Hakeem Jeffries, your leader in the House, when he was asked about Ro Khanna's War Powers Resolution, said, I haven't seen it. There is a sense that a lot of people out there in the country at large say, yeah, the Republicans are bad, but the Democrats ain't much better when it comes to foreign policy. What do you say to that line of criticism?
Well, I mean, I think that people, especially nowadays, let me give this some context, because I think it's especially important in terms of what's going on both with Ukraine and Russia and with Israel and the Palestinians with respect to Gaza. The world is much more transparent now. There are two pieces of technology that have enabled that. First, the fact that everybody's carrying a cell phone and basically has become a social documentarian of the world around them. And then the fact that almost instantaneously they can share that information that they've captured on social media platforms that go viral around the world. So because the world has become more transparent, you can't hide things from people anymore, and you can't spin things in the same way anymore. And the burden of knowing something, of seeing kids being burned and dying and so forth, is then the question is no longer do you know? We are in an age of knowing. It's do you act? And when people see that their leaders don't act and take action based on very obvious information, that's when I think they become skeptical, and that's often when they give up on you.
Well, Gaza is a classic example of that. We wouldn't know what was happening in Gaza if it wasn't for brave Palestinians on the ground, brave Palestinian journalists who've been killed in record numbers by Israel, brave ordinary Palestinians who are just going on Instagram and showing what's going on. And yet, the vast majority of the genocide in Gaza took place on a Democratic president's watch. Yes, Donald Trump has signed off on massacres and a siege that starved the Palestinians. He's talking about ethnic cleansing in a very vicious and illegal way. But again, when I point this out to people, especially on the left, they will say, but this began on the Democrats' watch. Joe Biden's the one who questioned the Palestinian death toll. Joe Biden's the one who sent weapons even when members of Congress were saying, don't send weapons. When is there going to be an accounting for that? Does there need to be an accounting for that before the Democrats can win back a lot of people in this country who were deeply disillusioned by your party's stance on Gaza?
I think absolutely. You know, the last hearing that we had with Secretary Blinken, who I personally respect, but I told him, I said, you know, I think what has happened is war crimes have been committed, that Israel has committed war crimes. And I said, as a country, with Hamas, for example, we have labeled them as terrorists. We have penalized anybody that associates with them. All of us on the committee, including Democrats, have rightfully, there was a rightful outcry about what happened on October 7th. We've condemned it very strongly. But what do we do when Benjamin Netanyahu's government commits war crimes? We don't do anything. We don't hold them accountable. We don't stop them. In fact, we continued sending weapons there, right? And so if we're a nation and a government that is trying to keep the peace and help nations get along, and in this case, for years, we've been trying on a two-state solution, then there's got to be accountability on both sides, not just one side.
Well said. Right now, there's a lot of reporting that Donald Trump plans to give another $30 million to the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, quote unquote, this fake humanitarian group that's organizing these fake aid sites, militarized sites in Gaza. Palestinians have been repeatedly shot and killed at these sites. Dozens, day after day after day. We're seeing massacres that are not being reported on, partly because people are, I don't know, bored of Gaza in the Western media or focused on Iran or whatever it is. But people are being massacred over the last few weeks. 15 human rights groups have come out and called for the suspension of this organization, saying the GHF is complicit in war crimes, the kind of war crimes you mentioned. What can be done about the GHF? What can Democrats in Congress do? What do you want to see happen to this outrageous organization that has become basically the site of multiple war crimes?
Well, first, I was critical of essentially of not allowing or stopping UNRWA from doing its work.
Yeah.
Right? There was a system there that worked, that got humanitarian aid, even though it was being held up, got humanitarian aid in a better way to the Palestinians. And so, again, when you have a fully functional Congress that's not just basically zombies for the president, that's where you would do investigations, that's where you would do oversight, and that's what you need to do. Unfortunately, you can see that that's not happening right now in the Congress.
You're on the Foreign Affairs Committee. I know your party's in the minority, but are there hearings that can be held? How do you shine a light on what's going on?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, there absolutely could be. And we ought to do those. But remember, Mehdi, like this goes way back. Like a few years back, I was saying if people, before October 7th, before all this, right, this is 2020, 2021, I made the point that even on a basic level in Congress, you never heard from Palestinian voices. Like the members of Congress don't hear the other side of the story, so to speak, right? And so the debate just became completely skewed. And you could hear the debate and still be supportive of Israel and still want them safe, which all of us do. But at the same time, there were when we would do these hearings over the years on Israelis and Palestinians, on Gaza, on the West Bank, and so forth, you wouldn't hear from any Palestinian voices. I mean, that's just a very basic thing.
And that's bipartisan. It was Democrats and Republicans alike who ignored Palestinian voices.
Yeah.
And the only person censured in Congress since October the 7th was the only Palestinian-American woman in Congress, Rashida Tlaib.
Yeah.
Not all the Republicans who said genocidal stuff.
Well, but that's how you end up with not being able to call out obvious stuff, like the fact that ambulances are getting targeted and hospitals are getting targeted and people in food lines are getting targeted. We have to, as Democrats, but really as human beings, like you have to be able to call that out. And people are seeing it for themselves out there. And when they see it on a very basic human level, and now you even have some Republicans, not politicians, but conservative people saying, hey, this is wrong. If you can't acknowledge that and call it out, even just on a human level, then people start to lose faith and trust in you as a politician.
Yes, indeed. Let's talk about what's happening at home, because it ain't much better at home, sadly, on this administration's watch. It's been over 2 weeks since Trump deployed the National Guard in LA to basically shut down anti-ICE protests. They're still there. How closer, let me put it this way, how much closer has Donald Trump taken us towards a full-on autocracy with his use of the military now to quell protests?
Much closer. Much closer towards authoritarianism. That Supreme Court decision that gave him immunity for quote-unquote official acts, I think, has been incredibly damaging. I see these scenes on the street of ICE agents, and at this point, we don't know if they're actually ICE agents or they're contract employees who are deputized as ICE agents, going in these military vests, in black hooded masks, and picking up people off the street, including, by the way, U.S. citizens.
Yes.
I mean, it really, I'm 50 years old, right? And, it reminds me of watching the evening news in the 1980s and watching what's going on in Nicaragua or somewhere where you have these
secret police.
Yeah, these police that are coming in and grabbing people and they've got their guns and everything. And I honestly never thought that I would see that in our country, in the United States. But here we are.
ICE is now clearly a rogue agency acting almost, as you say, a secret police, a militia, an arm of the Trump administration. They are not providing ID, they're not providing warrants, they're turning up with masks to grab people off the streets, legal residents, American citizens. They've, I don't want to say deported because it's not legal to deport an American citizen, but they've expelled, kidnapped and expelled American children.
Yeah.
Some with cancer. And yet, I don't hear any Democrats calling for the abolition of ICE. There was a whole thing about, abolish ICE, it hurt us in the midterms in 2018 or whatever it was.
No, you're right. I mean,
but how can this agency continue under a future Democratic administration?
Well, I mean, look, because I think people agree that you're going to have immigration enforcement.
Yes.
Okay, you were going to have it 10 years ago. You're going to have it 10 years from now.
But ICE was created by Bush in 2000, whatever it was,
Sure.
3. This is not some ancient agency that's been part of the American government. It was created.
Well, so what does that enforcement look like? I mean, I think hopefully most of us can agree, whatever your politics are, that it shouldn't look like people in full black masks picking people up off the streets and keeping them. There was a U.S. citizen, I think, that was kept for 23 days, right? Yeah, I mean, that, folks
So
should
what
be able to
happens
say
to
that's
ICE?
wrong.
Because you'll say reform, and I'll say, come on. You can't. How can you reform that? Those people who work there, they're loving this stuff. The people who work in that agency, they got to go.
Yeah, no, but listen, I think that slogan of abolish ICE, Republicans use that to say, you mean no immigration enforcement, right?
Yeah.
And look, and politically, when you say that in places like Texas and other places, that is damaging, right?
So how do you say it then?
So we're going to have immigration enforcement, but we're not going to have people out there, again, snatching citizens off the street and disrespecting due process and ignoring the rule of law. And that's what Donald Trump has done.
Should there be accountability for the people at ICE who are carrying out these crimes?
Yeah, I believe so. And I don't think that I think that they don't understand that. I think that they should be held accountable. Whoever violates the law should be held accountable. Otherwise, you're not on a slippery slope. I mean, you're on a fast lane to really, folks, not just undocumented immigrants, but people losing their fundamental rights,
yes,
their constitutional rights. And I think that more and more Americans are starting to get that, hey, if we let this happen to this group of people, well, I mean, who's next? Or how long is it till they get to me?
To be clear, when you say this group of people, you are of the view that ICE is targeting brown folks, right? They are racially profiling people.
They're
picking up U.S. citizens who are Latino.
Yes. Well, I mean, for God's sake, they were driving by an IHOP the other day, and they picked up a guy that was doing landscaping because he's brown, and they tackled the guy. You've probably seen the video.
Father of three Marines.
That's right, a former Marine and 2 active duty Marines, right? So you're telling me this guy, a few years ago, all of us were in agreement that somebody like that, who had no criminal history, had paid his taxes, had taken care of his family, had not had trouble in this country, should be able to get on a path. We couldn't decide on whether it was citizenship or not, right? There was not an agreement on that, but that person should have a path to legalization, to legal status. Now, Donald Trump has come and thrown that out the window, even though he said it was going to be about violent criminals. He's just going after everybody.
He is going after everyone. The other day we saw data showing that ICE arrests of immigrants with no criminal history is up 1,000% from Donald Trump's first term. Just this week, Texas Governor Greg Abbott signed a bill into law that requires Texas sheriff offices to partner with ICE. You, of course, are from Texas. Huge immigrant community in Texas, huge Latino community in Texas. How are people feeling in your community in San Antonio right now, knowing that they may be green card holders or citizens, but if they're out at an IHOP or if they're out at a Home Depot, they could get grabbed?
Yeah, I mean, I think very angry, but also very scared. There were folks that supported Donald Trump who thought that, again, that he was going to go after these violent criminals and felons and so forth. And they thought, okay, get those violent people off the street. But that's not what's going on. There is racial profiling going on right now, where if you're Hispanic, if you're Latino, and you're in the Rio Grande Valley, for example, and they drive by and they think that you may be quote unquote illegal, they're going to stop you. And there have been cases of people that show a driver's license or something else that suggests that they're a citizen or they have a right to be in the country, and that's ignored.
Yeah.
And so, people are both angry and fearful.
So again, just to return to the issue we talked about on Gaza, where Democrats don't have a great record here either. Yes, Republicans are worse, but for a lot of people, again, Democrats opened the door to a lot of this stuff. Joe Biden was very proud of his border enforcement, very proud of ICE detentions and deportations. You're old enough to remember, I'm old enough to remember the activist called Barack Obama the deporter-in-chief. He had the record high number of deportations during his period in office. For a long time now, Democrats have signed up to this idea that immigration should be seen through a militarized lens, an enforcement lens, this idea of kind of the priority being securing the border and deporting people.
That was post 9/11, right?
Like but Democrats went along with that. Democrats went along with that, right? Both Joe Biden and Barack Obama, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the deportations and so forth.
I mean, U.S. citizens were detained by ICE under Joe Biden too.
Sure. Yeah, but it's also substantively different than what's going on now.
Agreed. I'm not saying it's the same.
Sure.
I'm saying Democrats' record wasn't great. I think we can both agree. Surely you would agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I had disagreements with President Biden on immigration. You probably heard them. The fact is, just about every year, Democrats have supported increased immigration enforcement. And yet, and by that I mean more money for border security, more money for technology, for personnel, etc. And you remember the bill that almost passed in 2013. It passed the Senate with flying colors, 68 votes, and then John Boehner refused to put it on the floor for a vote. There were two pieces to that. One was increasing border security. The other piece was some path to legalization. Well, what happened was we kept supporting border security, which we have, but there was never any path to legalization or more visas or anything else for anyone. And that's where we are. We've been stuck in that limbo since then.
Should the next Democratic presidential candidate take a different line on immigration?
What do you mean by that? Which part?
What should their message be on immigration?
Well, I think, first, whoever's going to run in 28, I think, should not be quiet right now.
Yep.
Because there's some feeling in politics that, I'm just going to shut up as long as I can until I have to say something. They should be speaking up about what's going on right now. And then, yes, there's going to have to be a kind of reconciliation here. I mean, this is a very deep, deep wound to many communities that are going on. And there's going to have to be a kind of reconciliation here. And then hopefully we do get back to a place where, it may seem like a far-off dream, but where you can have some kind of compromise and the parties can get together and actually fix this thing. As far off as that seems right now, in a few years, things can change pretty quickly, too.
That's true. Last week I did a panel discussion in LA where progressive commentator Van Lathan took a bit of a jab at your party when talking about how it responds to Trump. He said, Democrats are going to write strongly worded letters. What's your response to that? The idea that Democrats don't have any tools to fight back with other than kind of procedure and decorum and rules. You hear that a lot, I'm sure.
Yeah. No, look, the fact is we've been organizing people. We've been parts of protests. We have been speaking out strongly. We've been doing things that we can in the legislative chamber. And so, also, yes, it is a fact that Democrats are in the minority party, right?
Yeah.
We don't control the presidency, don't control the Senate, and don't control the House. That is when the things that you stand up for and the people that you stand up for are most vulnerable because you don't have a majority there.
Yeah.
I think the way that Trump is acting as a president, acting in an authoritarian way in many ways, is something that we've not dealt with before as a country, at least in a few generations. Look, I've told folks, been part of many town halls now. That's the other thing, trying to get people, make sure that they're speaking up. But I've told them that the political class is not going to save you. This is an ensemble effort of Americans. This is an issue that's deeper than the Congress or the state legislatures. This is an American issue. And I know that obviously we were elected, we have a responsibility and so forth. I've been trying to do everything I can, but also it's going to take all of us as Americans to get out of this.
Just finally, less than 2 weeks ago, and the news agenda is so crazy, we've already moved on from this, Minnesota lawmaker Melissa Hortman was killed in cold blood by a 57-year-old gunman. She was killed with her husband in what Governor Tim Walz called a politically motivated assassination. We later found out that the alleged shooter had a target list and that among the names on there was your name. How terrifying was it for you to learn that this is where America's gotten to, where you're on not just random abstract death threats that members of Congress have always had, but a specific targeted list from a guy who went out and killed people?
Yeah, they called me on Father's Day that morning.
Awful.
And I didn't tell my family really until the end of the day. I was trying to get through Father's Day without talking about it. But we should be able to condemn political violence, whichever part of the political spectrum it comes from. But I do think it's getting more dangerous, Mehdi. I do think that political violence is ratcheting up, and I get very alarmed when folks don't condemn it. And even one of the senators, I think Mike Lee, who made light of it, right?
Yes.
Like these people just got murdered at their homes, and he's doing a joke on Twitter about the whole thing. That makes it worse.
You're a person of color, and the racist rhetoric coming from the Republican Party is pretty bad right now. I know people like to say on the media, both sides. I don't see Democrats engaging in the kind of racist, dehumanizing rhetoric that we see openly from Republican politicians. You've seen what's happened this week with Zohran Mamdani, who is now your party's presumptive
got elected,
New York mayoral nominee, and yet the response from, forget the Charlie Kirks and the kind of online trolls. Like members of Congress, Marjorie Taylor Greene put out a picture of the Statue of Liberty covered in a burqa. Nancy Mace invoked 9/11, which Zohran Mamdani had nothing to do with. I mean, this is the kind of, that's putting a target on his back, is it not? Suggesting he's a terrorist?
I don't follow their accounts. But,
lucky you. You just get to serve with them.
But yeah, no, it engenders like a lot of anger towards somebody, and it puts a very, like an intense spotlight on that person, and that can bring a lot of hate. And again, you know, what's going to happen in the long run, and I see it happening now, is that people just don't want to run for office.
Yeah.
Like they're not going to run for city council or Congress or state legislature or anything because they don't want to deal with all that animosity. And you know,
democracy can't survive in that.
No, so. it gets harder and harder. You know, and you know, I get called bad names, I don't know, 20 times a day on social media. I mean, that's just part of the job now. But it does feel like more and more it's crossing the line from people calling you names to people actually harming.
Congressman, stay safe. We appreciate you taking time out for us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you like this video? Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel and turn on notifications. For exclusive content and to support our independent, unfiltered journalism, head over to zeteo.com. Your support matters.